The energy in the lecture hall was electric. Every seat was filled, every pair of eyes locked onto the stage. The debate had not even started yet, but the tension in the room was undeniable. Ben Shapiro sat behind a table, his posture relaxed but sharp. His hands were folded neatly, and his expression was the same as always. Calm, analytical, ready. Across from him stood Daniel Ross, a well-known progressive journalist who had built a reputation for taking down conservatives in live debates. He had debated senators, professors, and activists. But tonight? Tonight was different. Ross had been waiting for this moment. He had spent weeks preparing, reviewing hours of Shapiro's debates, studying his patterns, looking for any weakness to exploit. This was his chance, his moment to expose Shapiro, to break through what he called the illusion of logic that Shapiro's supporters praised him for. He adjusted his microphone, cleared his throat, and then he went straight for the attack. "Mr. Shapiro," Ross began, his voice steady but pointed, "you claim to stand for facts, for rational debate, for reasoned discussion. And yet, time and time again, you engage in rhetorical tricks rather than honest discourse. Do you deny that you use speed, deflection, and misrepresentation to win arguments instead of actually engaging with opposing ideas?" The room stilled, a few gasps, some muffled chuckles. This was not a soft opening. Ross had thrown the first punch, and he had thrown it hard. Shapiro's expression did not change. He did not flinch. Instead, he simply tilted his head slightly, as if evaluating the question like a puzzle to be solved. Then he spoke. "First of all," he said, his voice precise, measured, "that is a fascinating way to start a debate. By accusing your opponent of being incapable of debate, it is almost as if you are trying to preemptively discredit me before we even begin." Ross opened his mouth to interject, but Shapiro was not finished. "And secondly," he continued, his tone sharpening, "if speed, logic, and accuracy make my arguments too effective for you to handle, perhaps the problem is not my rhetoric, perhaps the problem is your arguments." The audience erupted. Some cheered, some groaned. But one thing was clear. Shapiro had just flipped the attack back onto Ross, and Ross was already on defense. The room was buzzing. Some in the audience were grinning, whispering to each other. Others were watching intently, waiting to see how Daniel Ross would respond. Ross had not expected Shapiro to flip the attack so effortlessly, but he had not come here to lose. He was prepared. He leaned forward slightly, gripping the microphone. "That is a clever deflection, Mr. Shapiro," Ross said, his voice calm but firmer now. "But let us be honest. You are known for debating college students, people who do not have the training to counter your arguments. Tonight, you are debating a journalist, someone who knows how to fact-check, how to spot misleading arguments, and how to call them out in real time." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Ross was trying to reframe the debate. He wanted to put Shapiro on the defensive, to make it seem like he had been getting away with weak arguments for years, and that tonight would be different. Shapiro, however, looked entirely unfazed. He adjusted his tie, then spoke. Not rushed, not shaken, just controlled. "All right," he said, nodding. "So, your argument is that my debates are only effective because I debate college students. Interesting. I assume you have come prepared with examples of where my arguments are factually incorrect." Ross's jaw tightened slightly. This was not the response he wanted. "Actually, yes," he shot back. "Let us start with economics. You have repeatedly claimed that raising the minimum wage leads to job losses. That is simply false. The data shows that in cities where the minimum wage has increased, employment has not gone down. Would you like to correct your statement?" Shapiro's eyes flashed. He leaned forward slightly, his voice just a little sharper. "Ah, so we are doing that kind of debate. where you take a complex issue, cherry-pick selective data, and pretend it tells the full story. A few chuckles from the crowd. Ross pressed on, not willing to lose ground. "It is not selective, it is actual research," he said firmly. "The fact that you dismiss academic studies as cherry-picked shows that you are not interested in facts, only in arguments that support your ideology." Shapiro exhaled sharply, almost like he was amused. "All right, let us talk about facts," he said. "You claim that increasing the minimum wage never causes job losses. That is simply false. Every major study, including ones from the Congressional Budget Office, shows that while some wage increases have neutral effects, others do lead to job losses. In fact, the CBO reported that raising the federal minimum wage to $15 could eliminate up to 1.4 million jobs. Are they wrong? Are they using misleading rhetoric, too?" Ross opened his mouth, but hesitated, because Shapiro had done something subtle but devastating. He had taken Ross's argument and escalated it beyond what Ross had claimed. Ross had never said never. He had said the data did not always support job losses. But now, Shapiro had made him look like he was denying facts entirely. And that hesitation, the audience saw it. A few whispers. Someone near the front shook their head. Shapiro leaned back, completely in control. "I am happy to have this debate," he said. "But if you are going to claim that I misrepresent facts, I would appreciate it if you did not do the same thing in return." Ross's grip on his pen tightened. He was losing control of the conversation. Daniel Ross could feel it. The momentum was shifting against him. His argument had been solid, or at least he thought it was, but Shapiro had dissected it in seconds. And worse, the audience had noticed. A few people near the front were nodding along with Shapiro. Some were whispering to each other. Ross needed to regain control, and fast. He straightened in his chair, gripping the microphone a little tighter. "Mr. Shapiro," he said, his voice sharper now, "this is exactly what I am talking about. You take an argument, twist it just slightly, and then present it as if your opponent is denying reality. You mislead people. That is why I called your rhetoric dishonest." Shapiro smirked. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "You accused me of misleading people. I responded with data, and now your argument is that my response was too effective." A few muffled chuckles rippled through the crowd. Ross felt his pulse quicken. Shapiro was not playing defense. He was pushing forward. "I am saying," Ross continued, forcing himself to stay composed, "that your tactics rely on overwhelming people with information instead of actually debating the issue fairly. It is a technique called the Gish Gallop, throwing out so many points at once that it is impossible to refute them all in real time." Shapiro raised an eyebrow. "Ah, the Gish Gallop accusation," he said. "Classic." He leaned forward slightly, his voice controlled but firm. "Here is the problem, Daniel," Shapiro continued. "I am responding to your arguments using your words. I am not throwing out random facts. I am directly countering the claims you made. If you cannot respond, that is not because I am using a rhetorical trick. It is because your argument was weak to begin with." The audience shifted. A few people actually clapped. Ross felt his face heat up. He could not afford to lose ground. He switched gears. "All right," he said quickly. "Let us talk about something that does not require statistical manipulation. Let us talk about your stance on social issues. You have claimed that gender is strictly biological. Yet, the American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, and virtually every major health organization recognize that gender is more than just biological sex. Are they all wrong?" the crowd murmured. This was his chance. Ross was banking on one thing, that Shapiro would take the hardline conservative stance and dismiss the scientific consensus. If he could make Shapiro look outdated, disconnected, unwilling to acknowledge modern research, then he could flip the debate back in his favor. Shapiro paused. Then he let out a short breath. Not frustrated, not thrown off, almost amused. He picked up his pen, tapped it lightly against the table, and then looked directly at Ross. "Tell me, Daniel," Shapiro said, "if I walked into this room and told you I was 6 feet 5 inches tall, would that make it true?" Ross froze. The audience shifted again. Shapiro was setting something up, and Ross was already walking into it. The question hung in the air. "If I walked into this room and told you I was 6 feet 5 inches tall, would that make it true?" Daniel Ross hesitated. Not because he did not know what to say, but because he knew exactly where this was going. The audience was completely still. Some leaned forward in their seats, waiting for Ross's response. Others smirked knowingly, as if they had seen Shapiro set up this kind of trap before. Ross forced himself to respond. "No," he said carefully. "That would not make it true." Shapiro nodded. "Right, because height is an objective biological fact, correct?" "Yes," Ross said. Shapiro tilted his head. "And is biological sex not also determined by objective biological facts?" Ross's jaw tightened. "Sex and gender are different," he shot back. "And every major medical and psychological organization recognizes that gender is more complex than just chromosomes or anatomy." Shapiro leaned forward slightly. "Ah, so now you are arguing that gender is separate from biological sex. But just a moment ago you asked me why I do not follow the so-called scientific consensus. Which is it? If we are relying on biology, then biological sex dictates male and female. If we are relying on feelings, then gender is whatever someone says it is. You cannot have it both ways." The crowd shifted. Ross felt it again. That same shift he had felt earlier. He was on defense. "I am not saying gender is just feelings," Ross said quickly. "I am saying it is more than just biology. There are social and psychological factors at play." Shapiro did not miss a beat. "Sure," he said. "And there are social and psychological factors to why some people claim they are 6'5" when they are actually 5'8". That does not make their claim true." The audience erupted. Some people laughed, others clapped. Ross shook his head, frustrated. "That is a false equivalency," he said. "You are comparing gender identity, which is deeply tied to personal experience and medical research, to something as trivial as height perception. That is completely misleading." Shapiro shrugged. "Misleading, or just uncomfortable?" Ross opened his mouth to respond, but Shapiro kept going. "Look, you asked if I trust medical institutions. Here is my response. Science is not ideology. When medical institutions start redefining biological terms to fit political narratives, then they are no longer operating on science. They are operating on activism. And I do not have to accept that just because it has a fancy logo attached to it." More applause. Ross's pen tapped against the table. He was trying to find an opening, but Shapiro was in complete control. The moderator glanced at both men, sensing the intensity of the exchange. "We have to move on to the next topic," he said. "But Mr. Ross, would you like to make one final comment?" Ross knew this was his last chance to land a blow. He took a breath, sat up straight, and looked directly at Shapiro. "Yes," he said firmly. "Mr. Shapiro is very good at arguing, but argument is not truth, and just because someone speaks quickly and confidently does not mean they are right." A mix of applause and murmurs followed. Shapiro smirked. "Well, Daniel," he said, "if your argument is that I debate too well, perhaps the issue is not my debating. Perhaps the issue is your argument." The audience exploded. Ross sat back, gripping his pen. He had come into this debate ready. He had done the research, studied the strategy, and planned his attack. But now Now he was just trying to survive. Daniel Ross was out of options. He could feel it, the audience's reaction, the undeniable shift in energy. Shapiro had not just countered his points, he had dissected them, flipped them, and thrown them back. Ross knew he had one last chance. Instead, he had given him another viral moment. The hallway exchange. As the crowd filtered out, cameras still rolling, Shapiro and Ross were exiting opposite sides of the stage. That was when a journalist caught Ross. "Daniel," the reporter said, walking alongside him. "Final thoughts on tonight's debate?" Ross forced a smile, but his posture was stiff. "Look," he said, choosing his words carefully, "Ben Shapiro is a sharp guy. I give him credit for that. But let us not pretend speed and confidence are the same as being right." He adjusted his tie, exhaling sharply. "People love a good takedown," he continued. "But real conversations are more than just debating tactics. That is all I will say." With that, he walked off. But on the other side of the hall, Ben Shapiro was surrounded. More cameras, more questions, more reactions. "Ben, what did you think of Ross's final argument that debate is about more than just facts?" a reporter asked. Shapiro smirked. "Of course debate is about more than facts," he said. "It is about logic, reasoning, and being able to defend your position under scrutiny. That is what happened tonight. If Daniel did not like the results, he is free to try again." He adjusted his suit jacket, still completely at ease. Then he turned to the camera directly. "And next time," he said, his voice steady, controlled, "bring better arguments." With that, he walked away. And just like that, the night was sealed. Another debate, another viral moment, and another opponent left regretting the confrontation. What do you think? Was this a debate about facts, or was it about performance? Did Ben Shapiro truly win on logic, or was Daniel Ross right about debates being more than just speed and confidence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. Did Ross underestimate Shapiro, or was this always going to end the same way? Should debates be about winning, or should they be about seeking truth? Let's discuss. If you found this debate intense, hit that like button. It helps more people see the conversation. And if you want more breakdowns of major debates and political showdowns, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. The conversations are only getting bigger. The debates are only getting sharper. Let's break them down together. Until next time.